In this demonstration you will learn how to bind to another element in SAML. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've opened the Customers View SAML file of the Customers application that you can download from the course homepage on pluralsight.com. Now let's say you want to show in this text box the content of the selected list view item. To do this, you don't have to use event handlers in the code behind file. Instead, you can use a data binding. So first, let's give this list view here a name with the xName attribute. Let's just call it Customer List View. Now here on the text box, let's bind the text property to that Customer List View. To do this, you have to use a so-called markup extension. A markup extension starts in the attribute syntax with a curly. When you write a curly, you can see here different markup extensions, and the binding markup extension is the one you want to use to create a data binding. Now when you hit space, you can see all the properties of that binding markup extension. In this case, let's set the element name property, and you can see there is already the customer list view. Let's select this one, and now you have that list view as a data source. In the next step, let's use the path property, and now you can see all the properties of the list view. In this case, you want to bind to the selected item property of that list view. This means now you have the list view item. But from that list view item, you want to grab the content property. This is where this text is stored. To do this, you use here the dot syntax like you would do in C#, and you access the content property. Now let's run the application and let's see if this works. Let's select here Julia, and you can see Julia on the right side. Let's select Alex, and you can see Alex. But now, what is if you change here something? Then you see it does not change in the list view. Let's put the focus into the other text box, and then you see it gets updated. This means that from the content property of the selected item, the value is written into the text property, and if the user changes the text property, the value is written back into that content property. This is done because on a text box, the mode of the data binding is by default two-way. This means it is written from that source into the target, and from the target it is also written back into the source when it was changed. You can also set this to one time, which means it is just one time read from this property and stored in the text property. Then no more updates will occur. If you set it to one way, it means the value is written from this content property into the text property. Every time the content property changes, the text property is updated. But when you change the text property, the value is not written into the content property. So in this case, two-way is actually what you want, and if you want, you can specify it explicitly. I usually do this so that it gets very clear. Now I want to show you one more thing. Let's bring up the application again. As you saw, when you change the value in this text box, the item in the list view is not updated immediately. It gets updated when this text box loses the focus. You can also change this behavior with the update source trigger property of the data binding. On the text box, the default value is lost focus. When you set this one to property changed, it means that this source is updated when the text property is changed. So let me bring up the application again. Now let's go again into the first name text box and let's change this here. And now you see it is updated immediately on the left side in the list view. Great! Now you learned how to create a data binding. As you saw, you separate the different properties of the binding markup extension with commas. And you don't use any quotes to set these properties. Here you used an element as a data source. In the next clip, you will learn about other data sources and about the data context.